you almost have to think that Byron may have been told Kyle Busch cannot win this race because if he does, that would have knocked Kyle Larson out of the playoffs. And now that the points have reset, Kyle Larson's actually in the championship 4. He's, about 20-something points behind his teammate William Byron. But if Kyle Busch would have been able to get around A.J. Allmendinger or put a fender on him on one of those restarts and ended up winning the race in that 8 machine, Kyle Larson probably would be out of these playoffs, and Kyle Busch would be in the playoffs currently. So, big win for AJ. Love it. Very emotional when he got out of the car, but coulda, shoulda, woulda for Kyle Busch.
Yeah, I think all the playoff drivers who needed to show up showed up in a way, but a couple of them had their problems. Bubba Wallace qualified really good, qualified 4th, and was running probably his best road course race of his career until he got in an incident on the backstretch, missed the chicane, had to come down pit road and make a pass through, or I think he stopped on the front stretch. But either way, he lost all of his positions. He dropped from 11th place down to 30th. He still ended up finishing 16th, which is really good recovery from that penalty he occurred on the backstretch. But again, running a great race, needed a good race, but kind of fell apart for him. Kyle Busch, he had a good race going, but when you need to win a race, there's a lot that has to go right for you, especially a road course race against some of the drivers who were up at the front of this pack. He finished 3rd and showed speed for the most of the 3rd stage. But I think the biggest one we look at is Tyler Reddick. Qualified on pole, won the 1st stage, and managed a really good race. Knocked out Brad Keselowski. He's now sitting inside the round of 8. He's going to be racing these next 3 races for a shot in the championship 4. And I think he's got a good path with these next 3 races. I think with Homestead and Las Vegas, that 45 car is going to be really scary to fight up against.
Well, and then a couple other people played the point strategy because we had these stage breaks back into this race for the first time this year on a road course. And I thought that Chastain and Keselowski and Kyle Busch, they were on the points. They were like, we're going to try to get points. And so they did in the first stage, and then that made them pit kind of after that first caution, and that kind of mired them back in the pack. And we saw it all day. It was really hard for these cars to go up and pass one another. Now, if you had a better car than the person in front of you, you were able to kind of maintain the distance and then make a move and get around them, kind of like we saw Chase Elliott do a couple of times through the course of this race. But once they got strung out, whoever was leading and they had the clean air, and if their car was set up for a long run, they were really, really good, because we saw a couple of times Kyle Busch, he was leading, but his car was set up for more of a short run car. And then when we got into those longer periods of green flag laps, his car would deteriorate, and then he would end up getting caught and passed. So it was kind of one of those instances where if you were in the front, those front 5 or 6 could kind of maintain their positions within one another. But then once the run got a little bit longer, they kind of got strung out, and the leader was the leader, and you weren't going to go up there and chase them down unless they absolutely made a dire mistake. So a few of those guys in the bottom, they did the point strategy and didn't really pay off for them, because then they couldn't drive back up through the field. And Chastain even finished in 10th. But it just wasn't enough. He was down too many points at one point, and I think when it reshuffled, Kyle Busch was, I think, 40-something points behind, and Martin Truex Jr., who was kind of lackluster all day running around, I think he finished in the top 15 or right outside the top 15, was nowhere to be seen, but yet he still somehow he somehow transfers over. So it's one of those weird things where they tried to cash in on the points, and it just didn't pay off for them.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing about this track, the Roval. It's not easy to pass even when you have a faster car, because of how the runs with turn 1 and 2 and turns 3 and 4 on the big track play such a big role into the passing zones. Because you look for those deep, hard braking zones, and there's really only 2 of them, one on the back stretch and one on the front stretch. There's the infield section, the start of it, turn 1 and 2, it's a slower section, but it's pretty narrow, so it's hard to go for a pass there. But if you're battling a guy like when watching William Byron try and catch AJ Allmendinger on that final run, AJ was super, super good on the infield section and getting off the infield section and onto the NASCAR turns. And that's what made it so hard for William Byron to pass because I thought AJ was better in the braking zones, but William Byron was smoother all around the track and a little bit better than AJ when it came to getting onto the big track. But because AJ Allmendinger could create that space in the braking zones, it really gave William Byron no shot to catch up and make a run at a pass or even get to AJ's bumper in that entire run. So I think like the clean air, it's king at pretty much every track we go to, especially the road courses. But it's super technical when it comes to a track like this, where you have the infield section that's super slow and technical, and then you have the outside of the track, which you have super fast straightaways and then super deep, slow braking zones into chicanes, which I think when Ross Chastain and Brad Keselowski, they go for the points and then they get set back and they're back in the pack and have to restart. And the new restart zone, instead of going through the dog leg of the oval, they go through the chicane, and that kind of strings out everything. It's really hard for them to make passes and get up through the field. And I think that playing the points game for Brad Keselowski probably was the safe play because he had the buffer. But then again, Tyler Reddick, who we knew kind of going into this race was going to be really hard to hold off, he had a great race, and that kind of killed Keselowski. But I think Ross Chastain playing the points game, I don't really think that was the right play. I think they should have gone for the win and should have gone kind of what Kyle Busch was doing, even though they were only 11 points out of the cut line. I think they should have played for the win.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what you were saying about the passing zones, for me watching it from the PRN booth, it seemed like after they got out of turns 1, 2, and 3, and then we have this big right-hander going back to set up for 4, 5, 6, you could really maintain a lot of speed because you're able to come off of turn 3 into 4, and then they would get kind of bunched back up, and you were completely right. Once AJ got out of 5, 6, 7 and back up onto the oval racing surface, he was just able to set sail and take off, and Byron really couldn't keep up with him, even though he had shrunk the lead basically down to almost touching his back bumper coming out of 5 and 6. It's just AJ was so much better once he got onto that portion of the track. And that's kind of where we saw Chase Elliott take the lead in that second stage to win the second stage, is he was able to close that distance in that middle part of the infield. And then when he came back up on the track, he just dove to the inside, and that was all she wrote. So there were a few little passing zones on there, but if you really couldn't outbrake the car behind you, or if you're, outbraking the car in front of you, you weren't going to be able to kind of overtake another car without them making a mistake. So for me, I like this race. I hope the Roval continues on. I think it's probably one of the most interesting racetracks that we have on the circuit, because you kind of have to, you can't really set your car up for one thing or another. It kind of has to be kind of in the middle, I think, so that you're good all around and not just, okay, we're good on the bank surface. No, we're going to be better on the flat surface. And it really shows that we have some of the best technical drivers, I think, in the world. Because, we saw Mike Rockenfeller in a car this weekend, and he was pretty much, not in the greatest equipment, but he really wasn't making a splash at all. And so I think AJ winning this race is just a nod to his prowess, but also it shows that we do have some really good road course racers in the NASCAR circuit in the Cup Series.